teaching was not a passion of mine. Never has been when I was young. It wasn't a case of I grew up thinking I would love to be a teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher. I have a heritage in several generations of teachers. I haven't. It was not that. Teaching what I fell into by accident, it became a passion of mine. This is the first time ever that I felt as though I was contributing positively to society. I came as a newbie into a very large pond, if you will. And I just shut my mouth. I had to deliver and turn a failing school around. I could have, you know who I am? I'm Nav IQ. I've got Mr. Heads Up. Shout out Mr. Heads Up. But I didn't do that. I didn't do that. You don't know me, fam business. And through my actions, spoke louder than any words I could have. Respect matters to me more than being liked. I'm probably not the most liked. I've got my family who love me. Yeah. I've got my friends, my close circle of friends who love me. And that's enough for me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raising Humans. Today we have a principal from Dubai. Is it Naveed Iqbal, Nav IQ?
Nav Iqbal.
Nav Iqbal, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mohammed, brother.
Nav, for those that don't know who you are, what you do, could you just give a short introduction about yourself?
First, I always identify myself as a dad. That's how and a husband. So I have 4 sons, 4 boys, and obviously people are always surprised when I say that my eldest is 24. I take that as a compliment. And then I have, so Danny is 24 years old. He's graduating as a dentist. Then I have Ray, who is 20. He is studying medicine. And then I have my younger 2 boys, Sufyan and Cheyenne, who are in school right now, aspiring to be an engineer and also a pilot. So I'll be covered between my teeth and my flights. I'm absolutely covered. And then for myself, I'm a school principal and CEO, as well as what's known as a brand ambassador. So I oversee 4 schools in total, and also work as a vice president in education when it comes to a particular initiative launched in my company to do with parents.
Mm-hmm. It seems like you've accomplished a lot and you still look very, very young. Could you tell us a little bit about, let's just start from the start in terms of your childhood and where you came from.
I come from Bradford. I'm sure the accent doesn't give it away, but I come from Bradford. And I grew up with my mum only. I have 2 older siblings, brothers. But I come from, I guess, what you would refer to as a broken family. I don't see it that way, but when I was young, but I come from a broken family. It's just me and my mum. And that was my start. An immigrant family from Pakistan, Artak, Zilla Artak, so we're Pathans by heritage, and that matters through a lot of what I do. And that was my upbringing, my kind of moral code that my mother instilled into me was that. And she was my teacher, however, as many perhaps could relate to, no matter what ethnicity you are. If you are an immigrant of any part of the world, you're picking up that culture, but you bring your own culture. And language is a barrier as well. So my mother never spoke English and doesn't speak English. So growing up, there was a big responsibility on me as the only child, I guess, because my other brothers were with my father and I didn't see them till a very later age in my teens. So that was a little bit of the background, really. I can go into a lot more detail, I'm sure I will, but that was the inception where I started. It was in Bradford in a small family house in my mum.
How was like early life and school like for you growing up?
Early life, actually, I had a good childhood. I feel, don't get me wrong. I mean, I had everything. My mum provided everything that she could within her reality, within her parameters. She didn't work, so we were reliant on the welfare service in the UK, which is absolutely great. So shout out to that. I mean, there's many things that we can point out that we can improve, but I'm a product of that, I would argue. And in terms of growing up, a lot of crime around me. A lot of places to get into trouble. Schools weren't as great as perhaps schools that you and I are used to now, but I made the most of those particular schools, and it was harder to keep out of trouble than it was to get into trouble, and it was easily accessible around me from a young age. And my mum tried her best, and the way I kept out of trouble was sports. So most of my life I played football for a really long time. Nothing to a competitive level, but school level. And that kept me out of trouble and my friends out of trouble.
Well, what key values do you feel that you picked up from mum? What was some important things for her?
I think having respect for my ethnicity. As a Bataan man growing up and a strong woman instilling that moral code in me was important. So I never had any type of dissonance of my identity. We always spoke openly. I had responsibilities on me as well. I guess probably one part more so than I should have had as a child. So I was socially aware at a very young age of things that I perhaps should not have been socially aware, despite being protected as much as possible. So hard work, great integrity, being confident in self, in one's skin. I'd probably say that was the strongest part, what my mum taught me.
What's most fascinating is your story, unfortunately, is not uncommon. Many people are in a similar situation at some point when they're younger, but many don't. They don't get the chance, or they're not able to break the cycle or pass that glass ceiling. How do you feel like you did that?
There was a lot of mistakes I made, but I kept trying. One thing I didn't do is I didn't fall into this habit of, this has been done to us, this has been done to me. I never saw my color of my skin as an inhibitor. I recognize that there is racism around me. I recognize that that is a barrier, but I never allowed it to become me. Don't get me wrong, I grew up on a council estate for many years, lived in a rented accommodation most of my life. Perhaps why I invest so much in properties now, because there's something in me there, innate within me, that I need to have brick and mortar around me, not having it through all of my life until my teens. First house I bought was when I was 18, cash. So until then, we lived in rented accommodation. So I saw criminality, I saw discrimination, I saw racism around me, but I never saw it as an excuse that I've been held back. I have close friends from different ethnic backgrounds. I have white friends, I have South Asian friends, I have black friends, and we've always got well because we look at the inside part. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but I never allowed it to become me and be the reason why, for whatever reason, I felt like an imposter being there. And I have felt like an imposter in my positions. I kept trying, I kept making mistakes. I learned a lot. I kept learning. So, and that was important. Learn how to articulate, understand, there's that saying, isn't it? Work twice as hard for half as much. That was absolutely fine. But then built my brand around my usefulness and my purpose, and then stuck to that lane.
You talk about a brand. What would you say your brand is?
So I started off in business. Teaching, I always say, and it's always, people feel strange when I say this, is teaching was not a passion of mine. Never has been when I was young. It wasn't a case of I grew up thinking I would love to be a teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher. I have a heritage and several generations of teachers. I haven't. It was not that. Teaching, I fell into by accident. I worked training to be a financial advisor, working in banking in Abbey National Bank at the time, known as Santander Bank now. And whilst I did that, I was looking to run a business, and I remortgaged my property at the time to take some equity out to set up my first startup. No clue about business before that, no family in business. So I don't come from an industrial family in any way. And whilst I did that, 2007 recession. And at that particular point, 2006, I thought, let me just have something else to fall back on. And that was teaching. So I graduated in 2006 with my PGCE, and I went into teaching. And when I was running my businesses whilst I was teaching.
What business were you running?
I had cafes and I had shisha lounges. Haram, but yeah, I had shisha lounges and I had cafes, and I had a few, and I had a dessert diner. And many years ago, it was called Sweet Tooth, and the whole idea was around the world in 80 desserts, so different desserts from different parts of the world. It wasn't as successful as I wanted it to be, because Bradford was not ready and didn't have the refined taste for what I was trying to do. Only 5-6 years later, the gelatos came out. At that time, it wasn't ready. Manchester was, but Bradford was not. Anyway, so when I was in teaching business studies and psychology, that is what my degree was in. I could see that I was making a difference to young people, particularly young boys. and they had a role model like me when I was teaching business and teaching about break-even analysis, etc. They also knew I was running businesses. So I brought the application aspect to it, and they had a lot more respect for me because most of them, their uncles, their aunties, whomever, were in business, small to medium enterprises. So it was very relatable for them. It became a passion of mine. It was never started as a passion. It became a passion, and I realized I was actually really good at this. And I'm starting to, this is the first time ever that I felt as though I was contributing positively to society. And ultimately, that's why I always say teaching and my job is not a job, it's a profession, but it's actually a passion of mine. And it always felt that way. Whereas banking didn't feel that way.
Mm, very, very interesting. I think it's really good when a teacher can give real world application when they're learning. A lot of the time when you're learning, students cannot understand like, where will I use this in everyday life? Whereas for business, especially, how did you manage to balance both of these things? So you're working and then you've operated businesses, or did you stop operating businesses and you started teaching? Were you doing it hand in hand?
I was doing it both. So I'd wake up around, I think it was 6 a.m. every single day and get ready, start work. School started later in the UK, so normally around 8:30 or so. So sometimes went to the gym, came back, went to school, worked till school finished around 3:30. Straight from there, straight to my business, which normally opened at 5 p.m. And my staff opened earlier. In that business all the way through till 1 a.m. And then went home, slept for around 1:30, 2 a.m. and woke up every single day at 6:30. I did that for 5 years of my life. And if you have any type of those businesses, B2C businesses that are cash businesses as well, your Christmases, your Eids, these public holidays are the busiest periods. So you can't take those off. So I found myself for 5 years, I didn't have a single day off, and I didn't mind it. It's actually strange when you're doing something for yourself, and I always encourage anyone to set up their own businesses. I haven't done that. I've not been brave enough to take that step. My wife does that, and she, mashallah, is successful at it, and really proud of her for everything that she does in her space. But I haven't done it. But when I did do it many years ago, I found myself, I didn't mind doing those hours and balancing it out. It became a way of life for me.
There's a book called, and I'm sure you're aware of it, from Simon Sinek, which is Start with the Why.
Yeah.
Which is actually that I learned later that there's this motivational speaker who's passed away now called Jim Rohn. And he talked about building your list of whys. For someone that works so hard, there must be a why in your mind, or a list of whys. Could you give us a few of these? Like, why are you working so hard?
One of the biggest whys for me is and I say this to my sons, is do something that you contribute towards society. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter what theism or whatever you follow. Just do something that you will make a decent difference in society. And that's my biggest why, because growing up, there wasn't many role models that applied that. There was wealth, but it did not manifest and did not come and trickle down into our communities. It was always about getting out of the community. I mean, to be honest, I guess I am that. I got out of the community and I emigrated abroad. I went to Qatar first and now in Dubai, and I've been abroad for 14 years. So I guess for me, it's the why is always trying to do something positive within any community that I'm in. So Dubai is home, and I want to be able to make a positive change within Dubai for whoever, and give access to myself, in my own field, and make whatever difference I can. I'm an introvert, so I'm more of a social recluse. So I make more personal friendships and relationship with people. So if someone wants help, if they reach out, I will help, but I don't openly advertise that, but I'll make a difference in the background a little bit, one person at a time, one leader at a time, and just do that. And the world, the universe doesn't need to know, and that's how I would work. So that's my first why. My second why is my family, particularly my sons, for them to be able to have access to perhaps things and the trauma that I had. They don't need to go through that. They live in a different level of, I guess, subhanAllah, some level of affluence compared to my deprivation. And that was absolutely fine. Don't get me wrong. My deprivation is what made me who I am and taught me the values that I have. But for them, I would like them to be able to do better than daddy, better than mummy, and actually make a difference and not lose, I guess, that common touch whilst they're doing that.
Yeah.
You know, to be in the shoulder of their giants and not lose the common touch. That's the point of know and understand where they come from, and contribute towards that as well, and be loyal to that.
I want to talk to you about Dubai. So why did you move to Dubai in the first place?
Originally, I moved to Qatar. I moved to Qatar in 2011, and that was my first experience. And the entrepreneur within me thought, you know what? And I went there as an assistant head. I was not a principal. And it was because, you know what? The World Cup's coming there in a few years after that. If I move there, there'll be opportunities. And I moved there, teaching and learning, focusing on that in a small center, small type of school, specialist school. And from that, it grew. And when I was there, and every single expat perhaps may say this to you, I was only planning to do it for a year or two. And I was the same. I was only planning to do it for a year or so. And I wanted to leave behind the type of, I guess in my language, they say the mahal, or the environment around me. Because I could see that it was taking me a certain way rather than the other way. And just so, and again, I'm just saying this so your viewers can understand, the people around me, subhanAllah, I had some great friends, but I also had some relatives, other people around me that were great influences in a negative way. And I could have gone very different. It could have gone very differently, as is in my family. I won't mention relatives' names, but many of them are serving life, for example. So this was around me. This wasn't something I viewed from afar across the road. This was something within my own community and my own family, my own blood. And I didn't want to be that way. My mother raised me better than that. So I left to Qatar to thought, you know what, I'll start this off. I'll go down that. And from there, mashallah, it became 4 years. And then I was invited to start up a school in Dubai, International School of Creative Science. So that was my second startup. I did one in Qatar, and that was my second startup, and that became my bread and butter. Dubai has become home many years, and now even my sons are planning, inshallah, if they want to move here and build their life here, because it's a good balance for us as a family. And it's also accessible for me because I like to go back to my Pakistan. You know, my mother and father's country as such, and mine as well. And I like to go there 2-3 times per year with my family. So it's accessible from there, and going back to the UK as well.
As you know, this is also a parenting podcast.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about children, fathers, mothers, and just advice on how to raise kids. And you, alhamdulillah, have so far, I'm sure there's so much more to achieve yet, have had a successful career. And what kind of things are you trying to embed within your children from a young age? What are the key values or principles that you want them to act upon and adhere to?
The first part is age appropriate, however, honesty. I think that's important. So let me give you some practical examples. As you know, my son's sitting here in this particular podcast because I want him to see what his father does. And then we'll have a conversation before I came here. We'll have a conversation after. So he understands, okay, this is one part of being a school leader or a school principal or CEO. My wife does the same thing. Sometimes she'll take them. I take them to business. Whenever we look at properties and look to buy it, we'll take them there. I will train them. I will explain what's happening. They won't just be following us. They will understand what's going on. So that type of transparency, safe transparency, is important. Don't get me wrong. We don't sit down and discuss family disputes or whatever else. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But the good things that you can instill in them young, they're sponges. They take this up. And that removes the ceiling that you mentioned earlier. That will remove any ceiling. So my son Shayan, he doesn't have that type of floor standards that I had, or can I do this, daddy? He doesn't have that in him. And that's a quiet confidence. The skills necessary for them to succeed in whatever they want to, it's our responsibility as parents to make that happen. So I'll share with you an example, and I'm sure he won't mind. My eldest son, mashallah, is highly academic, and he got straight A stars and A's at A levels. And he went through his journey in the UK in private school to do that, and whilst he lived with his grandma. Then my second eldest, Ray, he was more sporty. He was more your vocational type of student, and he struggled with A levels, as did I when I was younger. I really struggled with him. I tried so hard. And then I put him into BTech applied science, and the school he was at, shout out to Wellington Silicon Oasis, a great school, and he was there and they really supported him. That gave him access to the type of profile of learning he wanted to have. And he always wanted to be go into medicine and become a doctor. The reality was, okay, you can do that in these parts. And then we researched it collectively, we understood, and now he's studying in Europe, he's studying medicine, he will do his 5-6 years, and he will go back to the UK, he will do his junior and masters, and he is recognized as well as anyone else. So it's understanding what their aspirations are, and as parents, making it happen while it's not encouraging, pressuring, but not to the extent of breaking them. As I say that, getting it just right, the Goldilocks effect, trying to get it just right, which is hard. I failed a lot at it as a father, but I keep trying.
You mentioned that you moved away from the UK and moved to the Middle East because the things that you went through, the trials and tribulations, you didn't want your children to experience similar things. Do you feel that, if they don't experience adversity, then they don't get a chance to build resilience? Or do you find other ways for them to become resilient over time?
You have resilience here. That resilience is different to resilience here. Resilience happens, adversity they'll face here. You see many people face adversity, losing their jobs, losing their businesses, struggling. COVID hit. They went from a multi-million-dollar business to reducing down to a single small desk space. Those families, as a principal, they couldn't pay fees in most cases. We had to support them. That was adversity. That was resilience. Those sons and daughters saw their mothers and fathers go through that. They faced that. So resilience is everywhere. Just because I went through my path to get here does not mean, and I had to learn this the hard way. And it was my wife, shout out to Zen, who said this to me is, Nav, why is it that they have to struggle the way that we did or you did, just for them to appreciate the value of hard work? They don't. They'll have their own struggles, and they'll have their own tests. And as we know, Allah puts you through whatever tests. Some people it's wealth, some people it's poverty, some people it's health, some people it's family. So we'll all have our tests. It's how can we come together? My big thing is, and it's always been important, to come together as a family. Coming from not having a lot of family around me, that's my only one thing that I always say, look, we all stick together. We face everything together. We support each other, and we build that nuclear family, and we be tight in that nuclear family. And whatever disagreements we have them. We have them privately, and we don't share them, and we work forward, inshallah. And that's what we normally would do. So resilience and adversity they will have.
That's really, really good advice. I feel like the world is changing now, and the challenges that we may have had maybe a century ago, it's different now. Living in Dubai in the Middle East and living in this age that we're in, what kind of challenges do you think parents face? Because, and I'll give you some context here, is when I was younger, my parents came from India, they came to the UK and they were busy working. And I felt like they didn't really understand the challenges that we had. And now, maybe this is ignorance, but I feel like maybe we're a bit more connected. We know what they're going through, especially being in the education sector. But for those parents that don't, what kind of challenges do you feel that children or parents should be aware of right now?
I think one of the challenges I always go back is I am quite traditional. And I feel as though when you come into a community that is a melting pot of culture, and it's, I would argue, it's becoming more intercultural than multicultural. I experience multiculturalism in the UK. I experience more interculturalism here, where you respect each other's community and you celebrate it a bit more. You may lose your own moral code, your own social construct, and what that looks like. So when you have developing concepts, ideas, even when intelligence is now artificial, that's the world that we live in now, that we're relying on something artificial in terms of to think for us. And that's a convenience. When these things will happen, we need to not lose that being a human and being from something. So if you are from a European country, have those values instilled in your family. If you are from a South Asian country, remembering that, not letting it be a hindrance, not, don't get me wrong, not being so traditional that you're not open, but understanding where you come from, and having pride in self and pride in that, not having to be apologetic about it. I think that's important. And I would probably say to any community, because I mean, my school, we have 105 nationalities. So I always say embrace that, embrace who you are, understand who you are as a male or a female or as a Muslim or a Christian or whatever. Understand where you are in terms of you come from, I don't know, France or England, or you're from England, but your ethnicity is Pakistani, or your England ethnicity is Algerian, or whatever it might be. Understanding what that moral code is, not losing sight of that. Because when, as my sons grow now and their sons, will they remember who their fathers are? So Sufyan is named Sufyan Abbas Khan. He's named Abbas Khan because that was his great grandfather's name. So he knows that. He's been to Pakistan. He's visited his great grandfather's grave. So we're continuing with that legacy, and that's important. And some cultures have this more than others. So my advice will be to any mother or father to understand and celebrate that ethnicity, and that's important, because that is the part that perhaps affects people. We get so engrossed in the popular approach of what's happening in society that we lose our own sense of self and identity, and that's when you'll have the imposter, or you don't know what you represent.
And when I was younger, it was very much so that I tried to negate my background because I was embarrassed of it, if I'm being completely honest. But only like as you go older, and even moving to here, I lived in the Middle East for a few years and moved here, that you actually realize that, we have so much more to offer. And here, like, we can learn from different people. And what I found is that people from different cultures have different ways of thinking. They approach things differently. And just by talking to each other, we think, oh, hang on, I've never ever thought of this thing in that way before. And that's the amazing thing. Like, even within the school I work in, there's people from different cultures, and we talk about different food and places they've been to, the way that they think, their approach to parenting, completely different. And it's amazing because you can take on things that, oh, actually, that's really good, I'm going to try that. Whereas before, I just pretend, oh yeah, we're all the same. Whereas now we have to celebrate each other's differences and learn from each other as well. And I think that's really, really good.
And imagine that, for example, you feel that way. Okay. Alhamdulillah, I've not felt that way, to be honest. And I guess my mom helped me a lot with that. But imagine, for example, my son, Sufyan, he was born in a Cuban hospital, and all Cuban doctors and nurses in an area called Dukhan in Qatar. He is a British citizen because his mom and dad are from there, but Pakistani heritage with Pathan ethnicity. And at some point in life, we're Yusuf Khail, so we say the tribe of Joseph. So all of that, where does he fall in that third culture kid concept? What is he? So when our sons and daughters, and many in my school, and thousands, my school has over 4,000 students, and I, mashallah, oversee nearly 13,000 across all of my schools. That's right now. And I see many young people who have this third culture kid experience. So what is their morality? What is their background? What are their virtues? It's up to us parents, no matter what the religion, no matter what our ethnicity, to instill those in those. Because if we don't, that's fine as well. That's a parenting decision. But if you don't, then they will acquire whatever they need to out of 67 clips on social media. And that will become their social norm. That will become part of their schema. That will become their identity. At that point, it may be too late. See what I mean? So scaling that back. So the 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, we need to understand what do we represent before they get to 17, 18. And at that point, it's too late. It's too late to bring in those virtues of family and the respect for elders, or individualisms or collectivism. You can be a philosopher as much as you want. If you don't apply it in a simple, practical way in your life, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've heard the term where if you don't teach values to your children, they will learn values elsewhere, and it may not be what you want them to, and therefore we need to set aside time and make sure that they understand. But one of the biggest things for me is, and I learned this quite young, is that people say a lot of things, but what they do is different. So younger, a lot of the adults were saying one thing but doing something else. you know. And as a child, I had this cognitive dissonance where you're saying to me one thing, but you're actually doing something different. So when I became a father, I'll be honest, I wasn't in the great shape. I wasn't really motivated. I didn't have a purpose. I just felt like I was just going through life. You know, didn't take anything seriously. Even falling into the profession of teaching. My wife was a teacher. My siblings are teachers. And I thought, let me just go down there. There was no passion. Only when Isa was born, then I started thinking, hang on, this little human being now, I'm responsible for. And he's going to look at me as the ideal person, as especially when he's younger. This is what an ideal person looks like. And is that what I really want him to see? Someone that's overweight, someone that's not really growing, becoming better over time, someone that says pray, but you're not really praying yourself, you know? And that really instilled a fire in me that I need to change, because he's maybe 6 months right now, but soon he's going to be 4 or 5. You know, I want him to see me training every day. I want him to see me reading books every day. I want him to see me thrive in whatever I decide to do. Because if I say to him, you can be whatever you want to be, but I'm just playing video games all day, or, you know, don't let anything hold you back, or reach for the stars, but I'm not doing that, then what's the point? And I realized that, look, I need to change. I need to make a difference, and actions speak louder than words. And someone said that to me when I was younger, but it just didn't register.
But sometimes it's bloody hard, I've got to say to you, when you get older, Mohammed. But like with me now, I'm 43 or turning 43. I've trained all my life. I've done something,
by the way.
And Jazakallah. But now I've got lower back injury. I've got, with the work. So the other side we don't talk about, which we should, is I was diagnosed with high blood pressure and I'm on medication at the age of 39. I tried not to take it. Everyone told me not to. And every single day I did, I became a high risk of a heart attack or stroke. I'm on statins for cholesterol. I've been healthy all my life. I've trained 6 times per week from the age of 18 consistently. Probably 90% of my life I've done that. I've ate clean. I watched my macros and micros. And it led to this. And the reason, the other side is, okay, you can do all of these things, but there's a balance. No one told me the other side, that if you're going to have 3 of your protein, 150 grams of protein in protein shakes, that's going to have an effect 20 years down the line. No one taught me that. No one told me that sleep matters. So, and you can live off 5 hours sleep, but your body does not recover well with 5 hours sleep. No one told me that, okay, those 180 kilo squats that you're doing and 140, 160, or 3 plates or whatever you're doing, and doing 4 to 6 reps on, you can do that. But when you're in your 40s, your L4 and L5 will be out, so you're going to struggle. So at that particular age, when you got a 7 or an 8-year-old boy who's looking at you as their role model, as their hero, you can struggle to lift him up. You've got to pace yourself. My friends that didn't train, didn't do all of those things, mashallah, they're all right now. They can lift their 40 kilo suitcase up. And I'm like, you know what? Can someone assist me with this? It's the other side. Now, I'm going through that phase now where I've always been, mashallah, strong of mind and body and spirit. But I'm transitioning and trying to find, okay, how can I continue to be a strong role model, but managing my health? So I can be here, inshallah, life permitting. You know, you don't know when, anytime it can go. But from our side, you know, they say have faith in Allah, but always tie your camel. I've got to do everything to tie my own camel. And how can I preserve and sustain myself longer? In your 40s, that is going to be a real thing. So with my kids, I'm pivoting slightly of, okay, I'll box a little bit, I'll swim a little bit more, I'll go with them horse riding. I might not partake in, even though it kills me because I love horses and I love horse riding. I do those things. So as we get older as dads, that's another thing you've got to consider. If you're a young dad in your 20s and 30s, preserve yourself in the sense of those ego lifts, or even if you can lift those weights, your body's later will thank you if you control it. And I always wore a belt. It wasn't that. I was trying my best, but just maintain yourself a little bit more, inshallah, because that's a part of life in your 40s and 50s as well that's coming. I'm realizing that, and I'm struggling with it right now, but it's part of life, I guess, part of growing up.
One of the things that I want to embed in my child, and I feel that it happens in different communities, is that we put this psychological glass ceiling in our heads based on where we're from. So, for example, because of the color of my skin, I'm not getting so far. And I mentioned there's so many studies here where psychologically you put yourself on the back foot even beforehand. And for my kids, I want them to know that you can achieve anything you want. You just got to try enough and fail enough, and don't use excuses to hold you down. I feel that happens a lot. I've seen that happen where you blame your religion or your color of your skin or where you grew up in as an excuse. Oh, that's why I didn't achieve much. And I don't want that for my children. I want them to know that there will always be times where you will fail. And there may be times where people will say no to you because of the reason that's not in your control. The power lies wherever you put blame. And every time you face a failure, you think about what could I have done differently. And I know that we've spoken about this a little as well. And I just want you to elaborate your views on this.
I think that exists, but I think it's used as an excuse at times as well. Just to self-soothe, I would argue, just to make ourselves feel as though we are capable and yet we are being held back. Is the ladder being pulled for many? Absolutely. But is that the only excuse? No, it's not. I mean, let me give you another alternative side. In my experience, there's been many opportunities in my schools for leadership, middle leadership, senior leadership. Let me just give you some examples of senior leadership. Head teacher positions advertised, looked at it, really wanted to, I had an affinity to find someone from a BME community, etc. Had many applications, went through those, looked at the experience, looked at and this may be the issue as well. The universities, the experience, the schools I worked at, looked at the amount of applications, and very few, a handful came that were shortlisted because they didn't have the experience. They didn't have a professional qualification for headship. That's a prerequisite. So immediately, if I'm being equitable and fair, that has to be put to one side, no matter what my preconceived feelings are about the situation. Then when it came to interview, and this is always the situation when it comes to teachers and from, let's just say, British Pakistani background, and I'm generalizing here a little bit, but this is my reality, my experience. I'm not saying this is the norm. Their questions are always around what are the salary, what are the benefits, would I get a flight allowance, what about and you know what, all valid points, but there's a decorum of when to ask what. And having that social or professional awareness. Every human being that's in front of me has a family. They may have their own anxieties. But the other communities don't ask these questions. They ask more about what type of demographic of students would I be teaching? Is there any further opportunities for growth? What does your professional development calendar look like? See what I mean? Those are the first, second, and third questions. And very useful questions. And I'm basing this point of mine on doing over 1,000 to 1,500 interviews. So it's a decent sample size. So I'm not being ignorant when I'm saying this. And it's unfortunate. Another thing I've noticed is when it comes to secondments on volunteering for positions, there's been many opportunities, again, my sample size over the last 18 years of observation. Our own communities, some of them don't apply for these positions because they're free. You've got to put in 10, 15 hours a week for what? I can moonlight and make that.
Yeah.
Why do I need to do that? I can tutor in the evening and make 400 dirhams an hour times 5, and I've got a friend from a family, which is a real thing. The others actually volunteer regularly. And then what happens is when it comes to the interview and when it comes to the questions being asked, they have lived experience. That's one part of the selection. So there's an other side to it. And the reason I'm saying that is when I am very socially aware of what I am, what I'm capable of, and what's around me and what I'm applying to. And I work within those parameters, and that's where my success comes. If I wanted to go and become a principal and a CEO with my beautiful BBC accent of a Dulwich or a Brighton or the New Harrow, and then I say, oh, it's because I is black or because I is brown, it won't work. See what I mean?
Yeah.
I have to live in this dimension of reality and time. My face might be too young. I'm not established enough, even though I'm in the field for 20 years nearly. But there's a reality. So I recognize, okay, there's supply and demand, and the market demands a certain thing. I have to understand that. And that's how it is. I have my area. I told you my bread and butter was startups. That's what I did. I paved my own way. New startups. I can do it with my eyes closed. School in a box. I can do that for anybody. I'm not writing books about it. I probably would in my 50s and 60s. I don't need to, but I know exactly what to do. I've got it down to a T. All through schools, faith schools, mainstream schools can do that. Now I've done a very large turnaround and I've helped others. I can do that. I've made my own field. And I'm just being really, really good at that and sticking to that and becoming an expert in that rather than a jack of all trades and a master of none. I'm becoming a master of this one.
One of the things you mentioned when you're talking about teachers and asking about salaries, etc. So one concept that I've tried to bring into the workplace, and it's related to chess. So chess is the king is the most important part. Whenever you're in the workplace, whenever there's a difficult decision to be made, my wife's in leadership, I'm in leadership, we always go back to that simple question, because I try to, if you don't understand something simple, then you don't really understand it. And the question I always ask is, who is the king and how is it going to help the king? So king for me in school is the student. Any question when it comes to a difficult decision is you think about, how is this going to, who's the king here and how is it going to help? So for example, difficult decision, teacher, we have to let this teacher go. For whatever reason, this is difficult. You think about, you strip away the emotion and say, is this better for the student? Is it not better for the student? It's about that. Even when it comes to salary as well, is that if you're working at a school or your values the same, you ask the right questions. And I think that mindset is slowly changing. Yeah. But you're right. There will be times where people will think about the money. And whilst that's important, that's not the right impression to be setting. And I think that's really
it depends
important.
I always say this when I come in, and I say to parents as well, in all of my schools, is there will be many times, I know my personality. I know I'm a direct, straight up person. I don't mince my words. I will do it respectfully. I will do it professionally, but I will be direct. But understand this, that any decision I make will be in the greatest, my moral compass, and I talk a lot about morality here. My moral compass is based around what is in the best interest of the children under my care. I will make that decision. You may find yourself in front of me disagreeing with me, but you know that I believe I'm making that decision right for your son and daughter and all sons and daughters. And I've been consistent with that. There's been a level of fidelity when I've held to that. And that's always served me well. So I think that's important. You've got to put the young people first. But remember, I told you, my purpose in life, my why was to contribute positively to society. And everything else is second to that. When it comes to my own contracts, negotiations, I find it embarrassing to negotiate. I struggle with it. I don't say, I'm not a tough negotiator. There's an expression in it, if you're a true Afghan, you're poor. So I guess that's in my blood somewhere, that I struggle. So whereas colleagues of mine, I know negotiate far better. And I know that. However, that's the reality. I signed this. I committed to this. And I will give fully to this. Yeah. It doesn't matter what another teacher did or another principal did or whomever did. They've got less experience than me, more. It doesn't matter. My professional commitment was here. You were in front of me, we negotiated, you agreed to this, we went forward and backwards and you signed this. That's what you need to understand. See what I mean? So there needs to be, many people lose this kind of emotional intelligence, and we have to be emotionally intelligent. And this is a key part of that. And you've got to commit to that. When it comes to the next contract, negotiate. Yeah. Be a professional. That's your commitment. And you have to hold true, because moving mid-year, me as a principal, I have opportunities all the time. But I made a commitment to my employers and I'm sticking to it. No matter who offers me more or whatever, or a greater opportunity, and there have been many, but I won't do it because I have a commitment to my community and I see that through. And that's an important part. So be a principal or a teacher or a teaching assistant, whomever, you have to do that. That's important.
I think that's really important for me. My word is everything. And more importantly, because my children can see that if dad has said something, it's done. So if you sign a contract, no matter what happens, you have to follow it to the end because you've given your word, and that's it. It's done. I'm really glad that, I'm not sure if it was recent or before, you mentioned a book which I really, really love, and always advocate for everyone to read it. So like I said, my siblings are teachers, and one of my sisters, I've told her, make sure you read this book. It's that book by Kim Scott, Radical Candor. The most difficult part for me of going into leadership was having difficult conversations. And like you said, you want people to like you. And therefore, when you're giving them something like constructive criticism, it goes against, internally that you don't really want to do it. But then for me, it always goes back to that question is, who's the king? And who do you need to really benefit? So you talked about relentless empathy, etc. It's an amazing book. And if you've not read it, you need to read it because it applies to all aspects of life, not just in schooling as well. I just wanted to mention that before because I think it's so important. I think for me, that's still something that I'm trying to get over, where if I truly care about someone, sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind and sit them down and say, look, this wasn't great. This is what you need to do to become better.
I see that as being, look, people use words such as kindness. You said kindness. Kindness is also honesty. So if you have, in the simplest way, if you have a friend of yours and you truly care for them and you consider yourself to be a kind person, then you will be honest with them. It's not kind to not tell them the truth and level with them and be straight up with them. It's kindness to say to them, this is what's happening, this is what I believe you should do, and this is what I believe you're not doing. Covering over that for them to fail again is not kindness. So let me give you an example of this. A few years ago, my vice principal at the time, there was an opportunity, he was moving on, and there's an opportunity for another head teacher in my school to apply for that vice principalship. This head teacher had been in that position for a year, less than a year. And they asked me, let's allow her to do the interview. Let her go through the experience of vice principal. And I said, no. Why? And I said, look, what you need to understand is this person had been in that position for less than a year. They haven't had any impact in that position. What message would I be sending them if they feel as though they can go for vice principalship and do the interview? Because that to them sends a message of, I'm ready for this, and they're not. They are entered into, kind of square term, they're entered apprentices, if you will, of headship. They need to make their mark and prove themselves on that before they can come to the other side and go for vice principalship. When I joined my current employer nearly 6 years ago, before I joined, I was running and supporting 2 or 3 schools and was well respected in my previous group. I came as a newbie into a very large pond, if you will. And I just shut my mouth. I had to deliver and turn a failing school around. I could have, you know who I am? I'm Nav IQ. I've got Mr. Heads Up. Shout out Mr. Heads Up. But I didn't do that. I didn't do that. You don't know me, fam business. I had to go in there because I had made no difference in this school. I had to do whatever I needed to do, nice and quiet, and make and have an impact. After 2 years, that school secured its good. We went up in over 37 judgments, the most at the time in this particular group. And then they noticed, and through my actions, spoke louder than any words I could have. And then I'm well respected, alhamdulillah, we're there. I was always capable and competent. I've done it twice before. But that only matters in my tools to be able to deliver here in this community, which was a much larger community. So everyone needs to understand that you have to make a difference through your competence, through your commitment. It's not just enough to self-promote and self-pontificate. That's not necessary. It's the actions that will speak. And again, my why is to make a positive change in any community I'm part of. And that is my school right now. I want to make a difference there, and inshallah wider and wider.
How do you get over your need to be liked? I'm assuming that this was something that you learnt over time, not something that you were born with innately. How do you get over that need to be liked or the approval of others? So for example, this interview that you said no to, it may have caused some negative feelings from that person or whoever it might have been. How do you get over that?
I didn't. I guess I've not always got over it, if I'm being honest with you. Obviously, growing up in a small family with not many opportunities and not having, you were, I think we were talking about, like with me, subhanAllah, homework was self-regulated. I guess that's where the self-regulate. My mom never told me to do homework. She said, do well in school. What is that? Do well in school, keep yourself out of trouble. That was it. Just do well. Come home without any fights or any other trouble. That was the ceiling. Just do well. Self-regulation came from that. Sitting at home, sitting in a corner, doing my work, doing my homework, not doing it so well, to be honest, because I had no tutoring and I had none of those kind of access to these things, no devices, no tech. Just made do with what I could. And that's where the innovation, that disruption came within me. So being liked was always something that I needed. But as I got older, there was a sense of resilience that was built in me, that it became positive. It didn't become any level of trauma for me that I must be liked. It didn't become an obsession for me. It's nice to be liked, but for me, I channeled it into, if I make a difference, then I make a difference. So I channeled it into, if I was to make a difference, then I make a difference. So if people like me, I prefer for them to respect what I'm doing. Respect matters to me more in my profession than being liked. I'm probably not the most liked because I also understand that I'm quite direct. I don't do the whole conversation. I greet, I'm respectful, I'm all of those things, but I don't go and I don't manipulate. I'm a psychologist, I can. I understand neuro-linguistic programming better than any man or woman. I can do it. I promise you I can. But I don't manipulate a situation beforehand and think, oh, he was lovely. He was so nice. He was so kind. I can do all of that. But there's something that needs to be done. And my time's an investment, as is yours. Let's be professional, be respectful, address what we need to address and deal with that. So being respected and having impact for me are far more important than being liked personally. I've got my family who love me.
Yeah.
I've got my friends, my close circle of friends who love me. And that's enough for me.
There was a term which you mentioned, and I'll be honest, I've not really come across it before. So I had to, just do a little research on it. It was called affluent neglect. And you mentioned this term, and after looking into it, I realized how important it is that we touch upon this topic. So could you tell us, for those that don't know what it is, what is it and why is it so important?
Affluent neglect happens in countries where there is a lot of amenities, convenience. Both parents may be working full-time regularly, and we might find ourselves overcompensating for our absence as mothers and fathers by having support in the household, maids, drivers, etc. But then in addition to that, having given our children, sons and daughters, all the tech that they want and giving them pacifiers because it makes us feel a little bit better as well, even though we'll deny it. What that does is, if your sons and daughters can order their food from Talabat independently and go with their driver and pick everything up, and then go onto social media and spend their time on socializing on there with their friends, and their friendship circles is a rectangle, and they connect their emotions within that. And that's how they pick up social interactions. That's how they pick up how they regulate themselves, with the mother or the father's not being there in the traditional sense, and not checking on them as much as necessary. There is this thing of affluent neglect that we see in our schools, in education, the art of saying no sometimes. Our young people, their minds grow into something very different. Some things is positive, okay, they have access, it's great, but there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of mental health issues and strains, anxieties, stress that I've never come across as much as this. I promise you, our children, subhanAllah, they go through trauma, they go through stress, but perhaps not to the extent as you mentioned about resilience of deprivation has its negative impact on our young people, as does affluence. It's our responsibility to address that. So one practical way would be, no matter how busy you are, in the evening, sit down as a family and have a meal together. Be there. No tech, no devices, mom, dad, anyone. You're there. You're in the moment having a human connection. That will matter so much. And if you were to do that, sometimes I find myself, I do that subhanAllah consistently. However, the times that life takes over and work takes over, I'm not around. My son Sufyan, he'll come and I'll just be sitting there, and he'll come and he'll just touch my shoulder, or he'll give me a hug and he'll go. He needs that human connection. He needs that. And that's necessary because when I'm not there for a day or two, he notices more. When his mum's not there for some time traveling, whatever, they notice. So as parents, we have to ensure that we do not work so hard and we say to ourselves, it's because we want to give our sons and daughters a better standard of living. But then the living part, let's live with them. What's the point having a standard of living later? Live in the moment now as well and block that time out. That's important. And that does not need to be going on expensive staycations, even though my wife does like those regular. She needs to stop. But it might be going for a walk as a family. It might be going to Ras Al Khaimah and hiking, like I mentioned. It might be going to a park and having a picnic and inviting any of your close friends around and having that communication, because the young people see they're the elders are talking. We are the elders, believe it or not. You might not realize that, but we are in our case here, especially where there's no grandparents around, for example. They need to experience that. Affluent neglect is a real thing, and we might be doing it and we'll not even realize it.
No, I think that when I looked into it, I was like, wow, I think we are. A lot of people are doing this, and they just, especially like when you have a lot of wealth, or you're in a privileged situation, you think, okay, my child has everything, but really they don't. Because when I speak to a lot of students, they want to spend more time with their parents. They don't want things and objects. They just want more time, And when you really think about it, the core of that, you think how important that actually is.
I mean, even Ronaldo said it. He shared a story where his daughter asked him how much would it cost for your time or something to that extent. But she broke a piggy bank and she tried to give him money so he could spend time with her. Children need time. Children deserve our time. Okay? We're the grown-ups. It can't be that we work so much to give them a better life that we don't live with them now. We have to live now with them, so that they see us around, they learn from our errors, age appropriate again. They see that we are human beings. And don't get me wrong, this doesn't happen here. It can happen in England.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up, the rich kids were the ones whose dads were taxi drivers. And when I was growing up, or they had the restaurants and they were working 24/7. So when my friend's dad would come home, they'd be sleeping. And when they wake up, the dad was asleep because he did a night shift. So they had a lot of money compared to someone like my family. But they had everything. They were the ones with the 20 quid notes and whatever else, and doing things and being able to treat everyone else. And they were affluent in my community, but they had the absence of the father for that. And that's where it came from in my mind, is I don't want to be that taxi driver. I don't want to be working so much. And again, you talked about my success, alhamdulillah, but I balance it out. If there's opportunities and if it means I've got to work till 9 p.m. every single day so that I can't take my sons to their jiu-jitsu classes, and whilst they're doing, I train and then bring them back in the car and bring them home and go for that walk and have our dinner together. If I've got to lose that for an extra, an increase of 10, 15, 20% on my salary, I won't do it. I value that more than the value of that, which will be a nice amount, don't get me wrong, Muhammad. I'll be able to do a few more staycations for the wife, but I can't do it. I can't compromise on that. I value that more. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a great husband in most things. I make mistakes, and even as a dad, I'm just living it. But I'm trying to do it with the intention, the niyyah of something good. Yeah. And I'll end on that point of, you just, and I know where am I extremely, I can practice more, subhan, I can do more. But in Urdu, there's that saying of Mirza Ghalib, I'm paraphrasing, but he says something to the extent of khudi ko kar buland itna ki har taqdeer se pehle khuda bande se pooche bata teri raza kya hai. To elevate yourself so much that before any destiny is written, God asks you, are you happy with this? And it's based on the hadith of Abu Bakr Siddiq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him, I'm pleased with Abu Bakr, is he pleased with me? To the words to that effect. So what I'm trying to say is, by no means I can practice more. There was times I was more, this time it's ebbs and flows. I'm just being consistent on decency, especially as a father. And getting it wrong, recognizing I get it wrong, learning from that, apologizing for getting it wrong, and continuing with that with a good intention.
Yeah. Now, what you're saying really resonates with me, because as I mentioned, when I was younger, I felt that I wasted a lot of my life. And then I tried to overcompensate until recently, to be honest, and doing things in the evening, working on other projects, working so much. And then just the realization that I'm not even spending that much time with the kids. So I'm working so hard for them, but by the time I become successful or money comes in, they're already old, and because I've not spent much time when they were younger, they don't really want to spend time with me. And now is the time where they want to spend time with you. Always, oh, Dad, where are you going? Can I come with you? You know, and they see you as like their role model. And if I'm older and they're older, and then I've made it, I'm successful, but they don't really have a bond or relationship with me, then what was the point of everything? You know, and that really resonates. And now for me is, I'd rather my goals, I'll reach them a bit more slowly, but I'll make sure that the weekends is for the family only. You know, like this is why I do my podcast early in the morning, because by the time I come back, everyone's ready and we can go out.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to like doing it in the middle of the day. So yeah, what you say really, really resonates. There's a closing tradition on the podcast, and I asked the guest for them to leave advice to their own children. And some of your kids are 20 years old, but let's assume that your youngest is now 20 and all of them are come across this podcast at some point in life. What message would you want to leave for them?
First thing I would say is be confident in yourselves of who you are, what you are. Be steadfast in that. Try to make a difference in any community that you're in. Wealth is relative. It's not about being rich. You've got millionaires out there that are not respected. I've been around many. I've had opportunities to become that in the wrong ways. Wealth doesn't matter. You've got to make a difference and be respected and be decent, I'd probably say. And the third part is, you know, be good to the women in your life. Inshallah, one, don't get me wrong, but your wives, your daughters, be good to them. I'd probably say that's a part that I could have done better at, to be honest, growing up and whatever else. Be good to women around you, inshallah, and love for them and care for them. Those are my three messages, I'd say.
They're amazing messages, but just generally this conversation has been I've gained a lot of value. I know for sure that my audience have, and it's just nice to see the person behind, not the mask, but you can see, oh, Nav the principal, that's it, you know. And just to see and hear a bit more about your upbringing and what drives you, I think that's really important, the why behind it. And I've always found, like, for me, I'm a big advocate of reading, and there was one thing someone said to me that really clicked for me, and it's like, I love reading biographies, autobiographies, and this person said that, imagine this person has lived a life of 50, 60, 70 years, and they've compiled all their mistakes and lessons into one book. And in that one book, it may take you a few days or weeks, but you've learned everything that he has, you know. And podcasts for me now, for the new generation, this is something similar for them, where they'll put them on their, they listen while they're driving somewhere or something. But we've been able to, whatever experiences that you've gone through, the lesson that you've learned, we've been able to download that into our own brains. I'm
being very PC because of your demographic, I'll be honest with you. I could have gone into a lot more, but I think that's important for them to understand our upbringing and our backgrounds.
Yeah, like the quote about standing on the shoulders of giants. That's exactly what you're doing. You're learning from other people's mistakes and lessons, and then we're trying to surpass and make this generation better.
That's Kipling's words, not mine. So if you want to read it, the poem If from Rudyard Kipling.
But I think the biggest takeaway for me would just be your whole message, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the world should be a better place because you were in it.
Yes.
And I think in terms of your legacy, and I'm sure there's so much more in depth, but that's what I would take away. But first and foremost, you've given us the best gift that you can give, which is your time. Exactly, you know, and we appreciate you taking the time out to come and sit here and have this discussion.
And thank you for having me here. It's been nice to talk. I don't do this often. I have to be honest, but I think it was important for our young people to know and recognize that people that look like them, people that maybe their father's ages or whatever else, and what our backstories are. And we all have one, and we are human beings. And just bringing that, just be human. I think that's important in a world of artificial intelligence where we just need to be human, and we shouldn't forget that part of us.
Now, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much. Thank you.